Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here today. I want to thank Lita and the Duke Voice Care team for bringing me here. And it's always a pleasure for me to share this information with everybody, because when I was first starting out, I really wanted to be a rock star. And I started looking for programs to go where I could go study to be a rock star, and I couldn't find any except maybe Berkeley. And my dad gave me a choice. He says, you can go to college for something, or you can get out of the house. If you go to college, I help you. If you get out of the house, find a job. And so I thought, I'll go to college. And so I went for voice performance, and as I started studying voice performance, I realized this is not rock and roll, but I did like it, and I fell in love with it over time. But as I started getting more and more to my career, I started realizing this wasn't my first love. My first love was always pop rock, and nobody is helping these people. And I started reaching out into the world and trying to meet others who were interested in contemporary commercial styles, and I started meeting them slowly but surely. And there's been a huge growth in workshops and teaching about these styles in the last 10 years. And it's kind of exciting to be a part of that and watching all the change that's going on. And I think my mission within it is to help make this information easily accessible, fun, and applicable to you. All right, so give me an idea who's in the room. How many of you are solely singers? Like, you don't really teach much, you're just only a singer. Excellent. How many people in here teach? Excellent. How many people in here have never sung rock and roll before? Good, so there's a fair amount. How many people in here feel that they're primarily classical singers who sing some rock on the side? Excellent. Good, good, good. It's just kind of nice to have an idea of who's in the room. So I thought the best way to start off a workshop like this is with a quiz. So we're going to do a pop quiz, okay? And I'm mainly interested in the singers answering these questions, okay? Because these really are focused on the singer. Can somebody tell me what this is? A car. Good. One, there we go. What's this? A wheel, a tire. Okay, so what's the silver thing? Rims. Yeah, I was looking for rims. Then I have these little bolt things. What are those called? Awesome. You guys are doing good. What's this big thing here? A hood. Awesome. All right, so this is what they call the cockpit, and what I'm interested in is, what are these? Pedals. Awesome. What's this? Awesome. All right, you guys passed part one. Let's go on to part two, which is the important part. What's that? Ah, we got number one. I'm impressed. What are these? Are those singers that are announcing saying that? No teachers. Singers only. What's this? Yes. Not right, but good try. All right. What's this? Singers only. Mm-mm. Good. Singers only. What's this? Mm-hmm. Singers only. What's this? Starting to see a problem right now. I think the problem is most of you who are singers want one of those, but you happen to know more about that than you know about this. And the reality of it is, if you want to make your living as a singer, you're hoping that that dude right there is the thing that's going to make you a lot of that, so that you can buy that. And that's a real big problem, okay? And so the goal today is to help get rid of some of this confusion and make it so you leave here knowing as much about your larynx as you do about the car that you want to buy with your larynx. Make sense? Awesome. What I like to do whenever I do one of these presentations is try to make these resources available to you so you can sit back and listen and you don't have to go crazy with your note-taking. So what I've done is I've created a website for you guys, and if you want to take some time here to write this down real quick, it's a very bare-bones website. It's like a white page with text. But it's through the Shenandoah University where I can upload files onto it. And so what I've done is I've made PDFs of the presentations that I'm going to be doing for you guys. I've also put on there PDFs of the handouts that are in your folder in case you ever lose them. And I'm trying right now to screen record the presentation. It's been working really well. When we tried doing it, it dimmed the screen, so we'll see how it turns out. But the goal is that I'll be able to upload a video of the entire presentation to YouTube, and then you guys can review it at any time you want. And I'll know for sure if it worked well or not after the first presentation. Then to make your note-taking easier, if you'll see down here on the bottom right, I have the page number boxed in. On every one of these slides, you'll see the page number at the bottom right. So if you see a diagram or a photo you really like, instead of trying to take copious notes, you can just write, see page 16. Cool? Good. It should help simplify a lot of things as we go forward today. So the voice, like all instruments, has three main components. It has a power source, a vibrating mechanism, and the resonator. Okay? If we think about a piano, the power source is my finger. Okay? It powers the keys. Then once I put power on that key, the hammer hits the string, and the string vibrates. So that's the vibrating mechanism. And the wooden body is the resonator. Okay? So when we're thinking about the voice, we're thinking about the lungs, which is our power source, the vocal folds, which is the vibrating mechanism, and the resonator, which helps turn those little teeny vibrations into something that sounds good. Okay? Let's start off with the respiratory system. And do I have a sound on the computer? Because some of the sounds weren't coming through. There we go. Excellent. We're going to start off and watch a video I found through National Geographic that I think gives us just a great introduction to what the respiratory system does.
With every inhale, our noses or mouths suck in about a pint of air, some 20,000 times a day. We can follow it on its journey, down the throat, past the voice box, and into the windpipe or trachea. As it approaches the lungs, air has a choice, left or right, but both lungs lead to the same end. The lungs' bronchi divide and divide into thousands of smaller and smaller branches, progressively filtering chemicals, dust, and smoke in the air, until finally they come to an end in this pouch-like ball called an alveolus. More than 300 million of them spread across each lung, with a combined surface area roughly a third the size of a tennis court. In less than a second, oxygen molecules exit the lungs here, through walls just 1 cell thick. They'll then cross into a surging bloodstream, be whisked throughout the body, and provide precious resources to every one of our trillions of cells.
I just love this video. I think it just gives you can see it and you can get what it actually does, right? So we don't have to worry about all those little teeny details. We need to kind of just look at the bigger picture of this as rock singers to kind of understand how the system works. If we look here and we have the torso of the body, okay, we can see that they've divided it into the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity. Singers a lot of times talk about breathing down into their belly, but as you can see, there are no lungs right there. Okay? The lungs are really up here and they end where your sternum ends, up on the upper half. So if you run your hand down your chest, you'll find that little hard spot right before it gets soft. All right? That's the upper part of the sternum where the rib cage is, and then the rib cage extends down. Okay? There's a better picture of what the ribs look like here. You can see we have 24 ribs in total. 10 of them circle all the way around, and the bottom 2 are what we call floating ribs. But if you reach all the way down to your back, you'll feel that they extend down into here. And then you can trace back up to where that sternum is. And you can see the rib cage is really, it does go down into this area, but there's not a whole lot that's right there. We have muscles that go in between the ribs that help in respiration. On the left-hand side, you can see the inspiratory muscles. These are called the external intercostal muscles. All I say is if you're going to, the barbecue and you're going to eat some ribs and you're eating the upper side of the ribs, there you go. Okay? And what each one of these muscles do is they start on the top rib and they go down into the bottom rib and they pull it up. Right? So we can see that. So whenever you breathe in, take a deep breath in. Those external intercostal muscles are flexing and pulling that rib cage up for you. Okay? Well, after you brought all that air in and you start to release it, sometimes we can use a little help to expel air. Okay? And one of the muscles we have to help in expiring is these internal intercostal muscles. These guys start on the top rib, they go down into the bottom rib, and then they pull it. They start on the bottom rib, they go into the top, and they pull it down. So they help crunch the guy back down. All right? So we have the ones that pick the ribs up, we breathe in, and as we breathe out, they help pull them back down. The other muscle, which is the muscle that almost everybody has heard about, is the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is this dome-shaped muscle that basically runs along the contour of the rib cage. Okay? And when we breathe in and the rib cage goes out, the diaphragm contracts downwards and it helps pull air into our lungs. Has everybody heard the saying, like, breathe into your diaphragm? If you didn't, you would be dead. You have no choice. Okay? And so this gets a lot of attention for, doing all of the work. And yeah, it's important, but the ribs and the muscles inside of the ribs are also just as important in helping everything move, right? Because as the rib cage lifts up, the diaphragm descends. So it has to be a coordinated motion when we breathe. Come on, baby. All right, so this is my warning. So I think one of the most helpful things is to get away from some of the diagrams and look at actual like body parts. And so I've got some photos here that are from cadaver labs. So luckily we're doing this before lunch. I don't know when you ate breakfast, but if this bothers you, it's time to close your eyes. All right, they're pretty mild, but this is what the lungs look like here, okay? If you ever get a chance to go to a cadaver lab, it's absolutely fascinating. Lungs will be about the size of this, all right, of a water bottle. The thing is, though, is that different people's lungs are different sizes. So you'll find some that are on the smaller end and some that are on the bigger size-wise. If you know somebody that smokes or you smoke and you go there and hold one of them, you'll see that the blackened lungs are really hard and firm, but the ones that have been more healthy are spongy and soft. And so I want to take my dad sometime. I'm going to see if I can figure it out. But it is a great shocking point for the students, if any of you are teachers. And we have the heart that's right here underneath. This is the abdominal cavity, okay? And so I always tell the students that if you think of a horror movie and somebody gets their guts slashed out, that's what we're going to cutting loose, okay? And right above that is the diaphragm. And why we think that maybe the diaphragm is all the way down here is because when we breathe in, this lowers and it pushes all of our guts down and forward. That makes sense? So take a breath in. There go your guts. Okay? Let's take a look at how this diaphragm works in action. You can see it. It's the pink thing right here. All right, and then we have the ribs. And you'll watch that as we inhale, the diaphragm lowers as the ribs extend. There we go. So it's breathing in, breathing out. In, out. Cool? Love it. We're going to talk a little bit more today when we get to the technique stuff of how we start to actually control this and what we do with it. The important thing, though, to know is that while you're trying to breathe in and you have that whole abdominal cavity that's shifting around, you also have muscles that are designed to kind of hold all of that in, okay? All of our abdominal wall muscles. As you can see, there are multiple layers. We have the transverse abdominis, which goes side to side. We have the rectus abdominis, which many people are trying to strengthen up so that they have their nice eight-pack. All right, and then we have all these other muscles that crisscross, the internal obliques and the external abdominal obliques. And they kind of create a corset, all right? So the interesting thing to think about for us as singers is the body type and how that affects things. If you have stretched muscles and you have more of a robust abdominal area, when you breathe in, it may be easier to expand. But if you've been working on tightening all these guys up with crunches and, you know, all of your kickboxing classes, and you take a breath in, you may have nowhere to really go. You hit a wall. And this is something we're going to talk about a little bit more in the technique portion of stuff, but body type really can affect things. If these muscles are so tight that they can't expand, we can't expect them to move the way that somebody like me, who has a little bit more stretch, is going to feel things move. Let's take a look at what these look like animated. This is a 3D model that I just kind of rotate so you guys can see how they wrap around. You can see they attach to the ribs as well. Okay? Let's take a look at the vibrating mechanism. Warning again, with graphic images. This is a cadaver larynx, right here. You can see the muscles that have been pulled away are the muscles, the neck muscles that surround it. Right here is the thyroid cartilage, which is where the vocal folds are. They're behind it, which you'll see in a minute, and this is the trachea down here. Okay? This is one that's been excised and colored a little bit as well. So we see all these diagrams that are much prettier. This is what it looks like. Let's talk about the laryngeal framework. The larynx hangs from the tongue from a bone called the hyoid bone. Okay, if you feel up here around the base of your tongue, you can kind of feel the area where the hyoid bone is. Okay, the thyroid cartilage is suspended from that, and it looks kind of like a shield, and it has a notch, and the notch sticks out in men as the Adam's apple, right? And it's right behind that notch that we find the vocal folds. That then sits on top of this cricoid cartilage, which was in our pop quiz, all right? And it looks kind of like what they call a signet ring, so kind of like a class ring where it has the big broad part in on top of the finger and then a thinner band. And it sits on top of that and it's able to tilt, which we're going to see an animation of exactly how that works in a minute. On the back, we have two arytenoid cartilages, and these guys here are movable. They're called synovial joints, and they move kind of like your elbow moves, where they can move and tilt in different directions. And they're there to help swing the vocal folds together and apart. Okay, because we need to be able to breathe in, and when we want to breathe in, we need the vocal folds to open up. And when we want to sing, we want to bring them together. And these guys are responsible for the motion that enables that. We also have the tracheum, which is down here, and this is how air leaves our lungs and goes up through the vocal folds. And we have the epiglottis, and the epiglottis folds over the vocal folds to help us keep from swallowing food down into our lungs. So let's take a look at a video that shows us exactly what happens when we swallow and how that epiglottis works. The epiglottis is right here. Here's the larynx, so this is our trachea. There's the vocal folds, and this is the esophagus going down into the stomach.
As a mechanical lever. This action causes the epiglottis to flap over the trachea, protect the airway, and direct food or liquid into the esophagus. For a normal swallow, the vocal folds close and breathing temporarily stops. Positive pressure is generated below the vocal folds. Because the swallow is both mechanical and pressure-driven, food and liquid are propelled into the esophagus and at the same time kept out of the larynx and trachea for a safe and effective swallow.
Cool? So this guy is very, very helpful in keeping us from aspirating food, but it can get in the way sometimes when we sing. If you've ever heard somebody and makes like a really muffled sound quality, that's part of the sound quality of that epiglottis folding over top of the vocal folds. All right, and so when we're trying to make rock and roll sounds, getting that kind of retracted tongue thing can really be in the way. And so one of the things we're going to work with today when we get into the technique section of this is how to get that guy to behave and not be in the way. And that can be rather tough at times. Let's talk about phonation. When we're talking about phonation, we're talking about the act of bringing the vocal folds together and creating the vibrations of which form sound. So if I have a duck call here that we can use as an example. And this duck call has a little reed inside of it that vibrates when I send air through it. And by itself, it sounds pretty blah. That's very similar to the sound that the vocal folds make. It's only when we add a resonator on top of it that we start to get some coloration to it. We can start to change the sound. So let's look at the buzzer. The vocal folds, as we said, are what's creating that buzzing action. You can see them here. They're these two white strips. Okay? They open to breathe in, and they close together to create sound. And we call this opening in this space with the vocal folds the glottis. Now let's look at a cross section of the larynx. And we'll see here, this is the trachea, which we saw earlier where the air comes up. And it goes through the vocal folds, which you can see right here. And then above them are these ventricular folds, which they call the false folds. Okay? These usually don't come into play in screaming and singing. They come somewhat into play with some of the screaming stuff. So when you hear people really make those guttural kinds of sounds as they sing, there's been some research in stroboscopy, which is the videos of the vocal folds in action, that shows that some people do seem to be able to bring these guys together. Not positive that's absolutely the best way to make these sounds. All right, and there's some other things that we'll talk about, doing some scream rock at some point here in these 2 days and how to make a basic scream. But we in general don't want these guys pulling in because they block the sound coming off the vocal folds, right? And so one form of what we call constriction, when the throat narrows and tightens, you get that strained sound. Ah! Right? We need these guys to stay out of the way so we can get ah and just get the buzz of the vocal folds. Now the vocal fold structure is complex, and I know Lita and her team are going to talk about this later. But we basically have the uppermost layer of it. It's called the epithelium. This is like Jell-O, and you want to take care of your Jell-O, okay? Now, you all know if you have a bowl of Jell-O and you leave it out on the counter, it gets crusty. And crusty Jell-O, if you go and whop the side of the bowl, it doesn't bounce that well, okay? We don't want crusty Jell-O. And so doing things like eating acidic foods that give us acid reflux and smoking, which dries up the Jell-O, not a good thing. We want to keep the Jell-O warm, because a warm bowl of Jell-O has a lot of bounce to it, okay? And so all the vocal health stuff that we're talking about is really a lot about trying to keep these guys hydrated and healthy and leaving all the innermost layers alone. These inner layers, the lamina propria in here, and then the body of the vocalis muscle is where the scar-forming tissue comes into play. There's no scar-forming tissue in the uppermost layer, but if you start agitating the rest of the vocal fold, you risk getting these scar-forming fibroids, I'm not missing the word, I'll let Lita talk about it more, but activated where they then start to interfere and grow into the epithelium, right? And so that's how we get damages from like abusing this whole thing instead of just letting the jello, flop around. Size of the vocal folds, they're actually pretty teeny. If you look at the female vocal folds, they're about the size of a dime, all right? And the male, the size of a quarter. Okay, if you look at the white on the your pinky nail, white part of your nail, they're about that big, teeny. Okay, if you think about that, that's pretty incredible. We make all that sound with something that small, right? And so if it's that teeny, we don't need to use all the effort that sometimes people use when they sing. We're trying to take these big breaths often and trying to propel all this air pressure the size of a dime. That's how it can easily get overpowered and we can get into trouble. So let's go over what this is exactly that you're looking at. So this is a photo of the larynx that's done through a stroboscopy machine, so either going through the mouth or through the nose. Here is the back of the neck, okay? And here is the front of the throat. So here would be your Adam's apple, okay? This right here is the epiglottis. That's the thing that folds back over. There's the vocal folds. And these are the arytenoids. Remember the little synovial joints, the things that are like elbows? So in this picture right here, the vocal folds are opened, or what we call abducted. And I put AB because it's AB-ducted, and AD-ducted is an easy way to think of it, okay? When they are abducted, they're apart. When they're adducted, adding the two of them together, so these remember that, they're pulled together. This is when we are able to phonate and make sound, and this is how we inhale and exhale silently. So let's take a better look at these arytenoids. Like we said before, they rest on top of this cricoid cartilage. And I have an animation here to show you guys the movement of them. Let's pause this for a second. Right here is this cartilage. All right, they're resting on top of the cricoid, and you're going to see them move. This is the vocalis muscle, the vocal folds. And there's see movement in both directions. So here we have them. When they contract, they come together, and they start to pull open. Okay, we have a better video of this as well to show you guys. All right. When we initiate phonation and we go to close the glottis, there's three main muscles that we should know about that help us pull these guys together. The first is the thyroid arytenoid, the next is the lateral cricoarytenoids, and then the inner arytenoid muscles. Okay? Intrinsic muscle names are actually a little bit easier to memorize and learn than they look on the surface. The first name tells us where the muscle originates. Okay, so in thyroid arytenoid, thyro tells us that the muscle starts in the thyroid cartilage. The second name tells us where that muscle inserts. So in thyroarytenoid, it goes into the arytenoid muscle. The origination muscle goes into that insert and inserts into whatever it inserts to, and it pulls that thing towards the place where it originated. So, like I said, if we have the thyroid arytenoid, it tells us that it starts at the thyroid muscle and it pulls the arytenoid towards the thyroid. That makes sense? Here's a photo showing that. So we would start right here with the thyroid muscle, thyroid arytenoid muscle, in this thyroid cartilage, and then it inserts up here into the arytenoid and pulls it that way. This helps thicken the vocal folds and contract them and helps with the closing of them. You can see here too, we have them labeled as well. Here's a video of that action. You can see that muscle tensing every time it starts to bulk up. Let's watch that again. Here's these lateral cricoid-arytenoid muscles that we were talking about. They come down here off the side of the cricoid cartilage, and they come up here into the arytenoid, and they help swivel that guy so it comes together. You can see it, so this is looking from the side, this is looking from the top, and it's this muscle that comes right down here. Let's take a look at the animation for this. So you see that contracts, it pulls them together. Contracts, it pulls together. All right. Let's watch it again, you'll see it on the side. So it's contracting, open, contract, open. Next, we have the inner arytenoid muscles, which are back here on the back. So as those arytenoids stick up, they have muscles that connect the two of them together, okay? And you can see right here we have the transverse arytenoid, which goes side to side, and the oblique arytenoid, which comes up here and crisscrosses. If we go to the animation of it, you can see them a little bit better. These guys kind of like just suck them together and help pull them in. Cool? Yeah. So let's talk about stopping phonation and abducting. The main muscle that we're going to think about for pulling everything apart is the posterior cricoarytenoid. As you see here, here's our arytenoid joints, and the muscle is right down here. Okay, it goes down at the cricoid cartilage in the back on the top of that ring, and it connects up to the arytenoids, and it helps kind of pull them back and apart. So that's contracting, contracting. So these are both, in this video you can see both of the cricoarytenoid muscles working. These are those lateral cricoarytenoid muscles, right? So that helps pull them together. Then as those guys release, the posterior cricoarytenoid helps pull them apart. Cool? And so at the same time that these guys in the, when you're adducting, pulling them together, you have those lateral cricoarytenoids helping pull the vocal folds in, the inner arytenoids helping suck them together, and the thyroid arytenoid muscle contracting and helping add bulk to the vocal folds. It's a kind of a complicated process. So when it doesn't want to work well, it's okay. You're trying to get 3 different muscles to all coordinate their action together. So there is some complicated maneuvering that's going on. The cricothyroid muscle is what helps us control pitch. It starts down here in the cricoid cartilage and it goes up here into the thyroid cartilage. When it contracts, it helps pull this guy down and it tilts it slightly forward. So everybody just start in the bottom part of your voice and go, ah. Ah. Now as you're going to slowly glide up, we're going to go, ah. Try that. Ah. Do you feel things kind of lift and tilt a little bit? All right, put your fingers here on the front and allow us to really pay attention to it and feel it. Go, ah. Good. So as you're making that glide, you feel this guy really contracting to help elongate your vocal folds. And as it does that, that thyroid cartilage starts to tilt and everything lifts up a little bit. All right? Let's take a look at how this guy works in motion. And as it contracts, those vocal folds elongate. Okay?
Highest pitch and lowest elongation?
Yes.
Opposite of a guitar string?
With the guitar string, it gets tighter. Yes. So it's the tightening. So the vocal folds are getting tightened as they get elongated, right? And so it's tightening them up. And you're going to see here that the vocal, let's talk about it as we keep going on. We'll explain it a little bit more as we get into vocal fold motion. When we sing, the air comes up through our trachea. And let's assume that our vocal folds are closed together, that we've breathed in, we've kind of slightly held our breath before we begin a pitch, and we went, and then we begin to phonate. So we start with the vocal folds being closed, and air builds up underneath of the vocal folds. That air pressure starts to overwhelm the ability of the muscles to keep the vocal folds together, and air starts to slowly push up through the vocal folds, bursting them apart. Once that air pressure lets go, we have a decrease in air pressure underneath of the vocal folds, and so the vocal folds have enough strength to start to close over top of that airstream again. All right? Basically, it's always this constant cycle of air pressure building up, starting to push the vocal folds apart. Once the vocal folds are apart and the air can escape, the air pressure slightly decreases, so we get the vocal folds to close back up over top of that, and we start the cycle over again. Put your fingers together like this. So we have 4 fingers all the way together. If we imagine that the trachea is underneath and the air comes up to blow them apart, we start to have the vocal folds pull apart by going pinky first, ring first, middle first finger apart. Then they come back together at the pinky, the ring, the middle, the first. So we kind of get this motion. Okay? If you're singing a pitch A220 or A440, your vocal folds are vibrating in that many times a second. Okay, so at A220, they're vibrating 220 times a second. All right, if they're doing 440, then you're doing 440 times a second. Now hold your arm out like this, all right, and flex it 220 times in 1 second. You can't do it, okay? That's the problem, is muscles are not capable of moving that quickly. So once we start getting too much muscular tension involved in singing, we can start slowing down the ability of that jello to vibrate. Okay, and then you start hearing people go flat as they're holding a pitch and going, ah, and you start hearing that pitch go downward. And so the way they have a tendency to compensate is by squeezing air upwards. All right, so then we have them squeezing, which makes them go down. Ah, so then they push in with this to make it go back up. Ah, and we get that really strained bad sound. Right? So the key is with all of these muscles is to let the intrinsic, which are those muscles around the vocal folds, do their work to pull everything together and try to keep the muscles that surround them out of the way and let the air do its work, which is what we're going to get to a little bit more this afternoon. Let's take a look at what the vocal folds look like in motion. This is a super high-speed video, and the guy is basically going, ah, okay? So this has been broken down. It's like, you know how the new iPhone does like 240 frames a second? This is a machine that's made by K Pentax, and they gave us the video to use for the Institute of Shenandoah, and it's really incredible. Pretty wild. Awesome. So when we're at the beginning of this video, they're on a low pitch. They're going, ah, and we're vibrating with the full 4 fingers, okay? So let's try doing that for a second as a group. Get my mic to quit falling off my ear. So we're going to start down here in what we would call, we're going to get to this afternoon of calling the chest voice, or it's thick vocal fold vibration. So put your 4 fingers together, and you're going to find the bottom part of your voice is going to be really, really buzzy. Go, ah. Good. And so I hear some people like warming the sound up. I'll show you guys a video in a second of a cadaver head and how bright and buzzy it is, okay? It's just very much like a machine. Ah, try that. Excellent. So in this position, the vocal folds are vibrating full. So do that. Go, ah. Okay? Good, 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 good. As you go up, the vocal folds start to, as you go up in pitch, and this person, if we're doing a smooth transition, we're going, ah. We're not trying to control the vocal fold thickness. We're just letting them slowly pull apart as we go up in pitch, which is what they naturally want to do. That's why most people have weak hyphens, right? As we go up, we go, ah, and everything pulls apart. What we have to eventually learn to do is to help kind of hold them together, so as they get stretched, we go, ah, okay? But let's imagine that we're not doing that right now. We're just letting them go up. So we're just going to make the big buzzy sound, go, ah. Good. Now let's slide up into where it starts to pull apart slightly. Ah. Then let's keep going up. Ah. Good. So now let's do that hand motion as we watch this video. So here we're in 4. They're phonating. Go, ah. There you go. Now you're going to watch, this guy's going to start to stretch a little bit. There we go. So now we're at 3 fingers. Let's say, ah. Now we're stretching more, and we're starting to go towards 2 fingers. Ah. Then 1. Cool? It's our vocal fold motion. Awesome. Can you mute the screen real quick while I pull up a video? Last time I did this presentation, it was way, 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 way over, and now I'm realizing I cut out some stuff. I got plenty of time, so let me show you guys these. All right, go ahead and unmute the screen. Let's see here. Excellent. Otherwise, trying to do that. Let's watch this. This is this video clip I was telling you of a cadaver larynx. So this is back from like the 50s, and they took this larynx out, they put a bunch of strings and things and attached it to it, and then they put it on a video camera so we could kind of hear it as they ran air through it to hear what it sounded like. It's kind of cool though. Cool. That's why I say it sounds just like a duck call going. There's nothing to it. Without the head, it's pretty darn quiet and pretty uninteresting. Let's look at this picture. Here's the front of the vocal folds. A lot of the videos we show, they put the front down on the bottom. But in this one, there's the front up there, so that would be the thyroid notch. As you can see here, the thyroid cartilage doesn't close in the back, right? It's open, so it's just like a shield. Here's the arytenoids, and you can see the strings, which they're manipulating the arytenoids with, okay? And when these guys come together, they're just vibrating, and they're vibrating very thick. Awesome. So now let's pull up the head voice one.
Let us keep in mind the thickness of the vocal folds. We have been observing their behavior when they are like this. But now let us apply longitudinal tension. The vocal folds become thin and tense. The sound they will produce is a falsetto tone. At large degrees of longitudinal tension, we can expect small amplitude of movement. It is difficult to move the vocal ligaments away from the midline. Let us apply adequate medial function and air and observe the vibration under normal light.
So that's up on that one finger edge. Do you guys see what they're talking when they're using the little thing to kind of pull it back and they're thick and they're thin? So that's what I'm saying is they pull like longitudinal tension. They're pulling the vocal fold longer as if that cricothyroid was activating and it pulls those guys longer. And as it does that, they naturally want to thin out. When we're learning how to belt or carry up some of those crazy high loud rock sounds, we're teaching our body to not let them naturally thin out, but to stay together as we elongate. Make sense? Let's go back to this video. That's a slideshow. So let's talk a little bit about the resonator. All right. Now, while a lot of people think that they feel the tones up in their head, or this is their resonator, hopefully you have something more up there than open space. Okay? We need open space to be the resonator. All right? The resonator helps take those little teeny buzzes that come off of the vibrating mechanism and turn them into a more complex sound that's more interesting to listen to. So here's my vocal tract, right, on this model, and I can make all kinds of manipulations to this one, and as I do, it'll start to flavor this tone quality and give me different, or flavor this buzz and give me different tone qualities. Right? As I change the size and shape of it, it starts to manipulate the sound a little bit. The vocal tract is basically the space above the vocal folds all the way up to the lips. Okay? We have lots that can get in the way. The lips can get in the way. Hopefully not too often the teeth can get in the way, but the tongue is definitely a big culprit in getting in the way. The soft palate, which has a tendency to want to fall down on us and block things. And the epiglottis, which when the tongue retracts, starts to fold over the vocal folds, as we saw in that swallow video. Okay? Let's talk about the tongue. All right? So we call the tongue the glossus. Okay? And we have muscles that are basically tongue sticker outers and tongue polar backers. Okay? So the tongue sticker outer, the genioglossus, starts here at the chin. Goes up into the glossus, and as it contracts, it helps us pull that dude out. All right? Then we have the hyoglossus, which starts down here at the hyoid bone, and it helps pull the tongue downward. All right? That's the thing that often is getting in our way, is that backward tongue tension. That everyone make the sound? Good, okay? That's much different than if we find our kiss tongue, which is out here. That's way more rock and roll. All right? So what we're trying to do is counteract the action of the styloglossus and the hyoglossus that are all trying to pull these guys backward and go to us when we need it to get out of the way and go to make rock and roll sounds. The tongue also then connects to the soft palate through this palatoglossus muscle, okay? And a lot of times if you've ever worked on trying to make space in the back, we get into problems because those muscles want to interact, right? As we start to stick our tongue out, sometimes we notice that our soft palate tries to fall, or as we try to lift our soft palate up, our tongue tries to go backwards, all right? And it really gets in the way. Let's take a look at exactly what happens during singing. This is an opera singer, and they're in an MRI machine where we can really see what happens as they perform. So that screeching sound is because of microphone placement, okay? But what I want you to do is watch it again and listen to the tone qualities that we get when that tongue pulls back. You can see what we're watching, right? Let's make sure everybody's on the same page here. Right here are the lips, the chin, the tongue. This is the vocal folds, all right? This is the vocal tract. And what's cool in these MRI videos is we can see how the vocal tract is shaped, right? It starts off a little bit wider, it narrows down a lot, and then all of a sudden it explodes back open. All right, the shape of the vocal tract is what gives us different vowels. All right, if I just hold my mouth open and start to move my tongue, you'll hear different sound qualities. I do some with my lips, but I can get a lot done without them. It's by manipulating this space and the shape of the vocal tract that I create different vowel tone rhythms. Okay? So sometimes though we want an ah vowel that has more warmth or more brassiness, and we're trying to learn how to kind of change the contour of the tongue to give us one or the other. All right? What I want you to listen to is the choices and vowels that she makes. She's making very warm sound qualities because it's classical music, and that's one taste in classical singing. And she does it, in her case, by pulling that tongue back. And for rock and roll, that's not always a desirable tone quality. All right, now let's see what a more contemporary singer does. This is a beatboxer, switching between beatboxing and rapping.
MC Yama, people call me Milk. Gizmos cutting up for a beat. I wanna bust just how I feel. To the two, we're ready off. Lottie-dottie. Lottie-dottie.
Cool. So here's what's interesting to me in this one. Here is the soft palate, okay? The soft palate, as we'll see here, is that basically it helps separate the mouth from the nose, okay? In this position right here, that soft palate is lowered. In the opera singer, you basically always saw that thing swing back up and close this off, okay? When he's making some of his sounds where he's both beatboxing and making a pitch, essentially he's allowing his tongue to close off this space between the soft palate and the throat so that the sound goes up through the nose as he makes the beatboxing sounds in front of it, right? So he's doing this. But it's all closed off right there so he can send the sound up through his nose while he makes all the clicks and pops up here on the front. It's pretty amazing how these guys have figured to do this stuff out. But what I find interesting in comparison to the opera singer is how forward his tongue is. Whereas the opera singer was often going, in the back, this guy's tongue is always bouncing around in the front. And this is one of the biggest differences between singing the more classical or legit and warm tone qualities versus the bright CCM styles that we have. So let's watch this again, then we'll compare them back to back.
MC Yama, people call me Milk. Gizmos cutting up for a beat. I wanna bust just how I feel. To the two, we're ready off. La-di-da-di. La-di-da-di.
Good. So let's go back now and watch the other one. There's that soft palate sealed off completely. Beatbox.
MC Yama, people call me Milk. Gizmos cutting up for thee. I wanna bust just how I feel. To the two, we're ready off. La-di-da-di. La-di-da-di.
Cool. Awesome. So here's our soft palate that we're talking about. That little uvula guy. Y'all see that in the back of your throat sometimes? All right. We're going to take it in a minute here. We're going to actually look at him. So the soft palate, if you run your tongue across the roof of your mouth, you'll feel that it's hard in the front. And then it gets soft the further back you go. So we call that hard part the hard palate. And the soft part the soft palate. It's easy to remember. All right. If we look at this cross section over here, we'll see that, again, vocal folds, sound comes up through the vocal tract in the back. It has to get past our epiglottis, right? And then the soft palate kind of can act as a dividing region. Either if it's low, the sound's going to try to go up through your nose a little bit. And we all know people who talk a little bit like that. Think Fran Drescher, if you guys remember Fran. And sometimes, even though I love her, Kristen Chenoweth does this as a character choice, right? All right, and then we have, if the soft palate lifts and seals off this hole back here in the back, we get a more proper sound, if you think more Julia Child's, where it seals off everything completely and the sound only escapes through our mouth. Okay? And then once it lifts up, it also gives us the ability to kind of add more space here in the back. When we were talking about the different vowels can be made and changed and adapted by how we adjust that space, this is one of the ways that we can adapt and do that. We have multiple muscles in here that are involved in controlling the lift and the opening of the soft palate. All right, we have muscles that go over in the arch shape, like the palatal-glossus. All right, the palate-pharyngeus behind it. This is one of my favorite muscle names, the tensor veli palatini. It sounds like it should be a dish at an Italian restaurant. All right, along with the levator veli palatini. All right, but it helps levitate the palate, and we have the muscle in the uvula that starts up here, goes down into the bottom, and inserts and pulls that dude up in the air. Okay, this is what the action of it looks like inside our mouth. So that's lifting it. There's slow motion. All right. So, best way to get accustomed to the anatomy of your mouth and your palate is to look at it. Let's just pass out some mirrors. Went to the dollar store on my way here, so I have a combination of big and small. Okay, people can share here. Pass immediately. Can you help pass out some of these? I'll grab some of the others. There's small ones like stacked in between. The smallest. There's that one. Like that. That's one of you guys. This one share. Play with them. Here. What else needs mirrors? We need mirrors over here. These guys down. Go. Do you have a mirror? I have a few more here. We'll make sure we So some of you may have to share.
Okay.
Yeah. And you already figured out the next step, the flashlight on the phone. Look at you, jumping ahead. So that's what I want you to do. If you have a phone with a flashlight, I want you to grab your phone with your flashlight. All right? And you can see inside. You can explore your mouth. It amazes me at how many singers I work with that have never looked inside of their mouth to see what's going on in there. Do you? Good, I love it. Okay, so I often make my students start off in lessons doing this. So here's what I want you guys to do. You got enough mirrors? So I want you to just open your mouth, Open your mouth, put the flashlight in there, or if you don't have a flashlight, it's light, good. And say ah. Ah. All right. And watch what happens in there. Watch how your tongue flexes and how your soft palate moves. Okay? Now what I want you to do is try to say more of a British ah. You go, oh. Yeah. Most of you guys should see that thing try to lift up. Okay? And if it's not lifting up, some of you, when we go to sing today, we're going to learn how to make that thing lift. At some point, somebody's going to have to lift it, so we're going to get to it. Right? Excellent. Then what I want you next to do is I want you to say more of a French nasal ah. This is the ah, ah. All kind of ah. All right? For some of you who have a lot of classical training, it's going to be really hard to get that guy to flatten out a little bit. Okay? So you go ah, ah. Good. Then lift it back up into your French ah. I mean your British ah. 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 Good. Now what I want all of you to do is play around with flexing your tongue in the back. So we learned about all of our tongue muscles that lift it up and down. I want you to start with a flat tongue and go ah. Then I want to do what I call the Adam Lambert tongue. The Adam Lambert tongue is the big arch tongue that does this. Ah. Uh-huh. Do that. Yeah. Now watch what happens in the back of your mouth. What does your palate do? Does your palate stay up or does it try to fall down? Ah. Now switch your vowel to A. You go A. Uh-huh. Good. Now switch it to E. E. Yeah. What do you guys notice in the movement of everything in the back? A little what? Yeah. And let's move up. Good. Was it easy for you to get that to move up? Okay. So how many people had it easy to get their tongue to move up? Good. How many people had difficulty getting their tongue to move up? It's okay. Good. That's tongue tension. We're going to bust that this afternoon. All right? But those tongue polar backer muscles, for the people who have a hard time getting their tongue to arch up, those tongue polar backers are really tight, and they're pulling everything down and back. Because when we swallow, that's what they do. They contract, and they help send food down into our esophagus. And because we do that like 2,000 to 3,000 times a day, right? We're constantly swallowing saliva or food or water. Those muscles are really good at doing what they do, of pulling back. When we go to sing, we don't want them to do that. But if we've practiced all day doing that, it's kind of hard. All right? And so we have to develop techniques and strategies to kind of overcome that and stretch and elongate those muscles and help the tongue stick her out or give us that Adam Lambert / kiss tongue. Okay? How many of you had a problem lifting up the soft palate? Anybody? Good. Good, good, good. So that muscle sometimes gets a little bit weak in the back, all right? There's been some studies, they've looked at people in London or England, in England looking at people with sleep apnea and snoring. And that muscle, it looks like, can atrophy and can get weakened over time. And that they've said that if they give people voice lessons, it seems that they can build up that muscle and strengthen it, and then it starts to hold a contour that's a little bit higher, and then people can breathe when they sleep at night, right? So imagine if your insurance company paid you to have voice lessons. I'm all about that. If you can make it happen, do that. Okay? But I think it's great. I want you to hold on to your mirrors because we're going to do more with this later today. This is something that we often ignore, that we don't really just look in there and figure out what it is that we're moving around. And I think it's extremely helpful. So let's talk about just a few of the external muscles as well. So we've been talking about the muscles that are actually in the larynx, the things that help us move and manipulate all the vocal folds and give us the longer pitches, help thicken things together. And we have these other muscles that we call the extrinsic laryngeal muscles that attach to the larynx in some way, and really they cause a lot of problems. Okay, if we could get rid of them, that would be awesome. But we can't. And they do have some benefits, but they also have a tendency to be more problematic. So here's another one of our fun graphic photos. And we've already seen this one before, but maybe now it'll start to look a little bit more familiar. What's this guy down here? Yes. All right. So there's a little bone right here. It looks like a ring. What's that called? Yeah. What's this up here? This thing that looks like a shield? Yes. Excellent. What's the little bump that sticks out right there? Notch, or Adam's apple, right? And what's behind that? Vocal folds, right? And they like go in a straight line back, okay? So here now you can start to see all these muscles that were pulled away are muscles that were attaching to this larynx. All right, there's muscles that help us pull the larynx down and muscles that help pull the larynx up. All right, and then there's muscles that go around the larynx that are actually involved in head movement, but either go close enough that they can interfere or they do attach along the way. Look at all of them. Okay, so the mandibles are jaw, right? We have the mylohyoid. The mylohyoid goes around the bottom of the jaw and it attaches to the hyoid bone. Okay? If we see this little guy here, this digastric, he also attaches up to the chin and he comes down here and attaches in a way that he can interfere with the movement of the hyoid bone. Okay? Then we look over here, we have the stylohyoid. The styloid process is this bone all the way back here, all right, where your jaw kind of hinges on, and it attaches to the hyoid bone. All right? We don't always want our larynx shoved up behind our nose because it can cause nasality sounds and a lot like that, plus it can cause a lot of tension. So look at all the muscles you have to fight against to not let that happen. Right? It can be really problematic. Now we do have some muscles that pull down, but it's a lot fewer than the ones that pull up. The sternohyoid starts from here in your sternum, and it goes up to the hyoid bone. Okay? We have, where's the other ones? The sternocleidomastoid muscle. It starts here at the sternum and it goes all the way up here into the mastoid process back here behind the jaw. It's used in turning your head, but it's running across in the same pathway, right? Where is my omohyoid? So this omohyoid, as you can see, branches off here again around the sternum, and it also pulls up to the hyoid bone and helps pull it down. And then we have the sternothyroid, which starts at the sternum and goes up to the thyroid cartilage. All right, so there's the three main muscles that pull everything down, and then we have all these other ones that pull everything up. Okay, so go gee gee gee. All right, those are all your laryngeal elevators, is what we call them. All those muscles that pull everything up. Now go ho ho ho. All right, those are all the muscles that help pull our larynx down. Okay, just say hey. Hey. Hopefully, if it just feels very comfortable, that's your larynx just kind of hanging out, not doing a whole lot. Say hey. 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 All right. Now say it like Barry White. Hey. Hey. All right. That's pulling all your larynx down. Now say it like Chipmunk. Hey. Hey. That's your larynx getting really up high in the air. Okay? So these muscles help us make different tone qualities, and they can be beneficial. But if you want to sound like Barry White and you currently sound like a chipmunk or Kristen Chenoweth, they're getting in your way. And we have to learn how to help them, get them to let go so this guy can come back to neutral, and eventually we can get our Barry White voice. And most of these are just highlights of the rest of the muscles that surround that. Good. Here's a 3D animation to give you an idea of what these guys look like inside. I think it's fascinating. It's very complex. And what my whole idea is, like I said, I want to make this like accessible and usable to you, is that there's a lot more information that we could talk about, but it gets even more and more complicated to the point where you start to think, okay, how useful is this? You know what I mean? Knowing every single muscle, you can't actually say, okay, I'm going to now release my sternothyroid muscle, and I am going to make sure that I engage my mylohyoid muscles because I need to slightly raise my larynx. And this is going to happen. But knowing that you're in a constant struggle between all these muscles that want to pull this dude up and the very few that want to help pull it down is the thing that's going to make you better singers. All right? So that you can get to the point and go, wow, I have trained as a classical baritone all of my life, and this is how I talk. And now that I want to sing high rock and roll, I may have a problem because my larynx puller downers are really, really strong, and I need to get them to lighten up a little bit so it can raise. Okay? The final muscles I want to talk about today are the constrictor muscles. And these are the guys that give us a lot of problems, okay? There's three of them, the superior, the middle, and the inferior. And what these guys do is they kind of help squeeze everything, and they're really useful in swallowing to help squeeze food down our throat, okay? So swallow. And you can feel things kind of tighten and pull in. Put your hands up here so you really can feel them and go. Swallow again. Now feel that same swallowing sensation, but I want you to do an O. And go, oh! You should kind of feel some of these muscles tighten in and pull in a little bit, okay? If you feel right around where your larynx is and go, oh! Oh! Yeah, that's bad news. We call that constriction, okay? And constriction is when these muscles engage and they squeeze down on that. Now here's the problem, is when you're younger, that thyroid cartilage is literally a cartilage, right? Like the top of your ear, right? So bend your ear, it's bendable and it can move, okay? But as you age, it ossifies, so it turns more and more bone-like, okay? When you're young, sometimes you can use those constrictor muscles to squeeze down on that and kind of bend things around in there a little bit. And so some young singers figure out that if I don't have the high belt note I want to sing alpha, I'll just squeeze the crap out of my throat until I push everything together in the way I want it, and now I'll have a high note. And that works really good until you're about 27. And then all of a sudden you can't bend anything anymore because it's really starting to ossify and you have no more high notes. It's because you learn how to do things by using those extrinsic muscles to kind of squeeze stuff together instead of actually strengthening the muscles that matter, which are the ones on the inside of your larynx. All right? The other thing that can happen is that you use those constrictors so much that you force those vocal folds together until you get voice damage, which is the other bad thing to do. Okay? So what we want to try to do through vocal training is teach these guys to stay out of the way and not interfere, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit more this afternoon. Let's take another look at one of these swallowing videos. So here's food that's gathering on the front of the tongue, and then it goes back. And you can watch how the shape in the back changes a little bit as the muscles engage. You'll see the larynx move up. There we go. Okay? So a lot of these muscles that we have are really involved in the swallowing process, which is why, we need them. If we got rid of them, it would be problematic. But when we sing, they have a tendency to try to engage because they think that our body is trying to swallow. And so essentially we're really in a lot of ways trying to teach our body when we sing to not kick in its natural swallow reflex, which is what it wants to do. Okay? Let's watch that again because I love this video. See, the epiglottis tries to pull back too. There we go. Excellent. So, if we go back to the beginning now, and go back to our part 2 quiz, let's see how we're doing. Now we all know this is a larynx. Okay. What's this thing sticking up? Epiglottis. Okay. It sticks up a little bit above that hyoid bone. It folds back. What is this little guy down here? Cricoid. Good. There's a little muscle that comes from here into the, well, let's say first, what is this guy here? Thyroid. Okay, so this little muscle that goes from the cricoid to the thyroid, what's that called? There we go. See, it's not rocket science. It's pretty easy, right? Goes from that to that. And what does that muscle do? Helps tilt the larynx. Awesome. And what does that do when it tilts it? Raises pitch. All right? So we have this thing that this thing rests on, and that muscle contracts and pulls that down, and it makes the vocal folds longer. If you know that, I'm happy. Right? That's what you need to know as a singer. You don't need to know that it has a bunch of complicated names to it. You just need to know that this thing rests on this. It needs to be able to tilt. And if I'm squeezing the crap out of my throat muscles and it can't tilt, there's probably a problem. All right? And I need to strengthen up this muscle in my training so that I have the strength to get that vocal fold to elongate. Okay? There's a technique out there, and people who say that there's a zipper in the vocal folds. Have we seen the zipper? No. Okay. Because there's not one. And so, but those are the kinds of things that I want you to take away from this as well, so that if you have somebody that tells you something, you go, I don't know that that makes sense. That's what matters, not that you know the scientific name for it. What are these guys here? What? Arytenoids. What are they like? What other joint? Elbow, called synovial joints, right? This is what cartilage? All right, is this the front or the back? Which one's the front back? Front? That's a really bad question. This is the front. That's the back. There we go. All righty, what's this guy? Yes, what's this guy? Yes, what's this guy? Yes, this. Yes, what's this? There we go. What are these? What's this little band that goes from there to there? Yeah, it's the ligament that runs through the vocal folds, but yeah, it's the vocal fold. All right. You guys no longer look confused, do you? Excellent. All right. Do I have any questions? All this up to here. You guys are witnessing a rare phenomena. I'm done before.